You know, in the world of energy, we see big numbers thrown around all the time. But every once in a while, a number pops up that just makes everyone, well, it makes them stop and really pay attention. Today, we are diving into a plan from the utility giant FirstEnergy that kicks off with one of those numbers. A number so big it could literally reshape a massive part of America's power grid. $36 billion. Let's just let that sink in for a second. To put that into perspective for you, that's more than the entire GDP of countries like Iceland or Jamaica. And FirstEnergy isn't talking about spending this over decades. Nope. They plan to spend it all in just the next 5 years. So that really is the big question we're tackling, isn't it? What on earth does a company even do with $36 billion? I mean, where does that kind of money come from? Where is it all going? And maybe most importantly, why now? What makes this the moment to make such a colossal bet? Okay, so to really understand a $36 billion future, we've actually got to rewind just a little bit. FirstEnergy is calling 2025 a transformative year, and when you look at the numbers, you can see they've built this incredibly powerful foundation to launch this massive next chapter. It really all started with just hitting their numbers. In the final quarter of 2025, they actually beat Wall Street's profit expectations. Now look, it was a narrow beat. We're talking just a single penny per share. But in the utility world, that kind of precision is a big deal. It shows that the company is running a really, really tight ship. But the revenue story? That was even more impressive. They brought in nearly $600 million more than all the analysts were predicting. That kind of beat doesn't just happen by accident, you know? It really shows there's some serious underlying strength in their business. But 2025 wasn't just about profits. Out in the real world, they invested a record amount into their grid. We're talking over $5.5 billion. And that wasn't just money disappearing into thin air. It actually led to a roughly 10% improvement in reliability for their customers. And at the same time, they kept Wall Street happy with a dividend hike and even got a credit rating upgrade, which is basically like getting a better report card from the financial experts. All right, so they've got this super successful year in the rearview mirror, and now FirstEnergy is basically hitting the accelerator. So let's dig into the blueprint for this $36 billion plan. This thing represents a nearly 30% jump from what they were even forecasting before. So first question, where does $36 billion even come from? Well, the most important part of this whole chart is that the vast majority of it, about 2/3, is expected to come straight from the cash the company generates just by doing its day-to-day business. They're not relying on outside money for most of this. The rest of it, that'd be covered by taking on some new debt and raising a much smaller amount from investors. Okay, so where's all this cash going? The biggest slice of the pie, a whopping $19 billion, is heading straight for the transmission system. You can think of those as the giant energy superhighways that move power over huge distances. Another big chunk is going to the local distribution grid. You know, the poles and wires that actually bring the power into your neighborhood. It's a massive, massive investment in making the entire system tougher, more resilient, and more reliable. And this all brings us to the big why, right? Why make such a colossal investment right now? And the answer is really a 1-2 punch of a problem that's looming on the horizon and a massive new opportunity that's just starting to emerge. So reason number one for the spending spree is actually pretty simple. Stuff is just getting old. I mean, listen to the CEO himself. He points out that a staggering 70% of their transmission lines are expected to reach their end of life within the next 10 years. That's not some far-off future problem. That is a ticking clock, and this investment is a direct response to it. But here's the thing. It's not just about replacing old parts. It's also about getting ready for a tidal wave of new demand. We're talking about power-hungry data centers for AI, the reshoring of industrial manufacturing. All of it is creating a need for electricity that the current grid was just never, ever designed to handle. It's kind of like trying to run a city's worth of brand new superhighways on an old system of country roads. An upgrade isn't just a nice-to-have, it's absolutely essential. Okay, so we've been talking about these huge, abstract numbers. How does a multi-billion-dollar plan actually take shape on the ground? Well, for that, let's zoom in on a massive project down in West Virginia. It is a perfect case study for how all this money translates into actual steel, concrete, and power. So, FirstEnergy is proposing a brand new $2.5 billion natural gas power plant. At 1.2 gigawatts, this single facility would be powerful enough to supply electricity to roughly 1 million homes.
They are hoping to get a low-interest federal loan to help build it, and the goal is to have it up and running by 2031 to provide a huge boost of reliable power to the whole region.
And this project, it also hints at the company's future ambitions. As the CEO mentions here, after the governor of West Virginia challenged them to do more, they said, "I accept that challenge." That signals that this new plant, it might just be the beginning, as they're looking to support the state's economic growth, especially with the boom in new data centers.
So, after all of that, what's the bottom line here? This massive plan has some pretty big implications for two key groups: the company's investors and, of course, its millions of everyday customers.
Okay, for the investors out there, this plan is designed to deliver steady, predictable growth. It's pretty simple. The more valuable stuff a utility owns, what they call their rate base, the more profit regulators allow them to earn. So by growing that base by about 10% a year, FirstEnergy is aiming to deliver 6 to 8% annual growth in profits, which in the stable world of utilities is a very attractive number. Which, of course, brings us to the question that's probably on your mind right about now. A $36 billion plan sounds great, but who ultimately has to foot the bill? Well, at the end of the day, customers pay for these kinds of upgrades through their bills. It's that classic utility balancing act, right? Investing for the future while trying to keep costs manageable today. FirstEnergy's argument is that they can pull this off, pointing out that their part of a customer's bill is already about 20% lower than their competitors. And their stated goal is to keep any rate increases at or below the general rate of inflation. And that leaves us with one final, bigger question to think about. We've just spent this whole time looking at a massive plan from one company. But the problems it's trying to solve, an aging grid and skyrocketing demand from tech like AI, those are happening everywhere. It really makes you wonder, is a $36 billion bet no longer the exception, but maybe, just maybe, the new normal for powering our future? Thanks for tuning in.